My name is Dina Moses. I'm the president of the Charleston Interreligious Council. And I'm going to keep my comments really short because we're, of course, late and just happy to be here and look forward to hearing all of our panelists speak. But I just wanted to say before I hand it off to Brennan Keegan, who is the assistant professor of religious studies at the College of Charleston, she will be giving our panelists fifth annual James Sawyers Jr. Interfaith Speaker Series. And as we heard from our keynote speakers last night, Drs. Mary Evelyn Tucker and John Grimm, we're in a climate emergency at the moment, and our religions are important players in the environmental issues facing our society and communities today, and they play a role in bringing light to the moral dimensions of the environmental crisis. So I'm grateful that you're all here to have these conversations. The Charleston Interreligious community and and fellowship among people of all faiths and of no faith. And we believe that in doing so, we're helping to create a better, more harmonious Charleston. And we do this through our speaker series and multiple events throughout the year. So I encourage you to go to our website at cicouncil.org to learn more about our events and gatherings. And this annual Interfaith Speaker Series is named for the Charleston Interreligious Council's past president, the Reverend Dr. James Sawyers Jr., who passed away unexpectedly in 2017. Jim was a minister and a scientist who cared deeply about science and faith and religion, and about the intersection of science and religion. I'm sure he would have been very pleased to have you all here today and to be a part of this. So I'm grateful that we're making this time and honoring him in this way. And I'd like to thank Roper St. Francis Healthcare and Mission Department for making this series possible, and also to the College of Charleston and the International African American Museum for their partnership in this series. And now I'll hand it over to Brennan. So thank you all.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here for students in particular. It's the Friday before spring break, so this is awesome that we even have 3 students. So thank you for being here to everybody. Today we are joined by a number of wonderful panelists. First, we have Regina Scott Saunders. She is a native of the Low Country. She is a 2018 Jefferson Award recipient and honored finalist for the 2020 Low Country Remarkable Women Award and member of the Ministerial Alliance. Scott Saunders is the founder and executive director of Destiny Community Cafe, the area's only pay-what-you-can healing community cafe and the first nonprofit soul food and Gullah Geechee cuisine cafe. Saunders' goal is to raise awareness through her online platform about food insecurity in this country and to reduce food waste. Destiny Community Cafe provided over 2,000 meals during the worst of the COVID pandemic, and the cafe collaborates with the Medical University of South Carolina's Urban Farm and other local college environmental sustainability programs to reduce food waste through community service projects, hands-on education, and giving from the heart. Next to Ms. Scott Saunders is Alicia Brewster, who joins us from Sustaining Way and South Carolina Interfaith Power. Her career began as an elementary school teacher in Greenville County and Charleston County Title I schools, where she witnessed the direct impacts of poverty on her students and families. Alicia's work includes leading a project on Sustaining Way to build capacity in environmental justice communities and building on South Carolina's Interfaith Power and Light's current vision and mission to develop a plan for growth and advancement of a faith-led movement for climate justice. Alicia also serves as tri-chair of South Carolina's Poor People's Campaign, a movement building awareness and action to address the interlocking injustices of poverty, racism, environmental degradation, militarism, and religious nationalism. And she facilitates the Greenville Mentoring Collaborative's work on to build a network of youth and mentoring providers working together so that every youth in Greenville has the supportive relationships they need to develop into thriving adults. Okay, thank you for being here. Next, we have Dr. John Grimm, who is a senior lecturer and research scholar at Yale University, where he has appointments in the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, as well as the Divinity School and the Department of Religious Studies. He teaches in the Joint Master's Program in Religion and Ecology and is the co-founder and director of the Forum on Religion and Ecology at Yale with his wife, Mary Evelyn Tucker. With Tucker, Grimm directed a 10-conference series and book project at Harvard on world religions and ecology. Grimm teaches courses in Native American and Indigenous religions and world religions and ecology. He has undertaken field work with the Crow Absaroka people of Montana and Salish people of Washington State. He has an amazing list of publications in the growing field he helped found, religion and ecology. And lastly, we have Omar Mohammed, currently works for the Department of Natural Resources as a fisheries biologist and is the executive director for the Low Country Alliance for Model Communities. He completed an EPA Environmental Justice Academy program and is a participant in the joint EPA Region 4 and South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control Leaders and Environmental Action Pilot inaugural class. Omar has successfully funded community research initiatives to train residents, conduct a community-based health survey to assess health service gaps at the community level, conduct a zoning analysis for environmental justice communities, and several other citizen science projects. Specifically, has led efforts to create the only community land trust in the city of North Charleston, negotiated $4 million in mitigation with Palmetto Railways, led an effort to complete the first community benefits agreement for a local community and a warehouse developer. And on Zoom, we have Queen Quet Marquetta Goodwine. She is a published author, computer scientist, lecturer, mathematician, historian, columnist, preservationist, environmental justice advocate, film consultant, and the artivist. She is the founder of the premier advocacy organization for the continuation of Gullah Geechee culture, the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition. Queen Quet was selected, elected, and installed by her people to be the first Queen Mother. Hedpondi Bodhi, I should have asked you how to pronounce that, I apologize, and official spokesperson for the Gullah Geechee Nation. As a result, she is respectfully referred to as Queen Quet. Thank you so much for being here. So I envision today as more of a conversation than formal presentations. So as questions emerge, feel free to pose them. But just to get us started on this topic, I would love for each of you to define ecojustice for us, and particularly for those of you that are in the Low Country here, to think about how within the Southeast, and perhaps Charleston specifically, what do you see as the major threats to ecojustice?
What order are you going in?
Whomever would like to speak first is welcome.
Well, I'm speaking already. So how 100 children to do? I'm so glad for day with all 100 children, and it's Marquetta and it's head upon the body. And no 100 children ain't always cracking teeth like this, so you okay. All right. And so, yes, it's Queen Quet, chiefess and head upon the body of the Gullah Geechee Nation. And in terms of justice at any time, it is about balance and harmony, and a word that now has become somewhat of a buzz phrase, equity. And so to treat things in an appropriate manner, especially that which is living. So when we talk about eco-justice, to me, that is a living environment. So the waterway that you see surrounding me, the trees, people often hear me state the quote that came to my spirit from the ancestors, "Hunter must take care of the root for heal the tree." So the trees itself have life. All of these bodies need to be treated in an equitable fashion. And so that's the eco-justice that I see. And the threat to it is the urbanization and suburbanization of not just Charleston County, but this coast. that people refer to as the Low Country, and that is the Gullah Geechee Nation, because that throws off the ecological balance of it and kills a lot of the coast and thereby threatens not only environmental health, but human health. So that's how I would lead off with an answer to what you asked us. Good to see everybody.
Good to see you. And so just to kind of continue with introducing myself, so as was mentioned before by Brennan, I am a former elementary school teacher and I'm a mom of 3 children, and coming into this space was something that I never thought that I would do or be in. However, I was kind of it by default because of another position that I have. But what I found is that I define eco-justice the way that I define all justice. And I am motivated by my faith and motivated by my children and all of the work that I do. And so it's simply, for me, loving my neighbor. And I think, all the time about the prophet Micah and Micah 6 and 8, he is responding to a question about what we need to do to amend for our actions. And he says, it's very simple. We need to act justly. We need to love each other. We need to walk humbly with God. And I think that that is the heart of really all injustice, is when we are behaving in that way, when we're acting in that way, when we're loving first, then we are pursuing justice. Then we are caring for all of the aspects of our ecosystem and caring for one another. We're able to sustain one another. And so that's what it means to me, and that's how I define it when I'm talking to my children. And really how I keep things simple for myself is just remembering Micah 6 and 8.
Nice.
Again, my name is Regina Scott Saunders with Destiny Community Cafe. We run from 7 years now, a Pay What You Can Cafe, so I hear a lot of table talk firsthand from our community, what eco-justice means to be. Justice for, like she said, our neighbor. And it's really getting bad here for Charleston. Plenty of communities have not been able to even drink their water because of the overdevelopment that's going on here. I think we're still #1 for flooding. It's really bad. It's even to the point that the homeless, we bring them food, but they're asking for clean water. So that's the #1 thing here locally that I'm experiencing and hearing in our community. And it's getting, like she said, for our health, the children, breathing, everything. But yeah, definitely development for Charleston.
You want me to add? Okay, thank you. Omar Muhammad. And for me, I think the definition of eco-justice goes back to environmental justice. I mean, we're interconnected, and everything is interconnected, and we impact the world around us. So I see eco-justice as defined by the previous speakers, in addition to what is environmental justice. And environmental justice centers the lived experiences of people, and it applies fairly processes, decisions, laws that impact us. And that's what environmental justice is. So when we talk about justice, we're talking about the fair application, the fair use, right, of the resources that we are responsible for. We each are responsible for our impact on the environment. I think one of the challenges to eco-justice is our lack of acknowledging the harm, right? The harm that we have caused in the environment, the harm that we have caused in our communities. We fall into error because we resist acknowledging the harm. And when we don't acknowledge what we have created, we cannot come up with solutions to begin to address. So I think the first challenge is that we have to acknowledge that we have created harm, that we have created situations of injustices, inequity, and disparities that exist in communities. And how do we address that is acknowledging it and then moving towards solutions. And I think those are challenges for us as human beings, because we don't want to think about or accept the worst of the human being, right? We don't want to think in those terms. But I think in order for us to address that, we're going to have to acknowledge that harm has been created, and how do we move past that? Not blaming, right? Not placing blame, because we're not, we're going to have to move past the blame, right? And I think also, I'm going to say a second challenge. A second challenge is, with that harm comes the attitudes and the feelings and the baggage of hurt, right? We have the term pain bodies, right? And that pain sometimes prevent people from even working towards a solution. So how do we acknowledge that harm has happened? And who has been the receiver of the harm? How do we move past that hurt and begin to work together collaboratively on solutions? I think that is some of the work, that necessary work that we need to work together on.
Very beautiful. This gives me a feeling while we're here. This is really remarkable statements. Queen Mother, I just want to thank you for bringing all our brothers and sisters out in the world there to this gathering, and really affirming that, and Alyssa, that sense of love from your community. That's a response behind Ecojustice. That's what's going to make it happen. And Regina,
Sure.
I joined with you. I want to carry some water with you to folks who need it. It's real. It's real. And acknowledging. I feel, Omar, just meeting you now and learning that you're working for the city. And he mentioned that he was involved in equity work. And my mind went off. I've been reading some statistical material this morning. I went to finance, so I said, I really don't understand equity. Can you explain it to me? And he says, well, it's communities. And I felt like such a dummy. Think about, what is equity? It's communities, isn't it? So my feeling for Ecojustice, my local region, is Mary Evelyn and I run a degree program between the School of the Environment and the Divinity School. And these are their own communities. And it's very interesting. The Divinity School, the seminary, social justice. The School of the Environment, environmental justice. And it's like they could hardly talk with one another. And so, new words. We have new words to acknowledge, Omar, what you're bringing us to. And I think ecojustice is a new word. And I think it's bringing us to an understanding that we are a weave. We are a weave of one another, and that weave goes into the world. And so we're trying to discover the nature of that weave, acknowledge it, care for it, love it, and live it as fully as we can on these short years we're given in this life. Yeah.
That's correct.
Absolutely.
Thank you all so. Okay, I might just yell. No. Okay. I have a special mic.
Your video is off, so anybody who's online cannot see you all now.
Oh, thank you for, letting us know. Okay, well, yes, thank you so much for all of these really vulnerable words for really vulnerable issues, right? And I would love a little bit more on thinking about how faith and family and community motivate the need to remove these pain bodies, right? And if you all could say a little bit more about how you see faith and activism perhaps working together as a tool to respond to the climate crisis, but also respond to, I think, as John points to, this new word, right, that the overlapping categories of social justice and environmental justice. So how do faith and activism respond together?
I would love to take this one because a lot of work that I do is on the international level. So at the UN level, I'm now engaged in interfaith panel discussions regarding this same topic you're saying, especially as it relates to climate change, climate justice, various terminologies, climate action. And the thing is, in many faiths, the person who is deemed the founder or the leader of that faith was a person of action. So in, as I would say, Christendom, for those of us here in the Bible Belt who were raised Christians, even if we took on other spiritual practices in addition to it, if you look at scripture, it's about stewardship of land. So the action to try to counteract the destructionment that's been talked about in the term, y'all use development, I use the term destructionment, has been that thing that now the scientists are saying have contributed to the negative impacts on the environment. That is the domino effect causing a lot of human health issues, like having heat island effect that then affects people's lungs and breathing capacity and so forth, as well as the flooding issues that we've all talked about in the previous question and our responses therein. And so for me, how do you utilize faith? As an activist, I'm the artivist because I do my activism through the arts. It's a term I developed over 30 years ago and took around the world. And the reason I use that for myself, not for everybody, is because it fits what I do, because I want to activate things, but more often than not, people won't listen if you're trying to tell them about science. I'm also a scientist, but they will listen if you put it in an artistic way, or they can view it in some artistic format. But it takes faith to continue to go on no matter what format you're using if you're trying to activate people to take an action that's going to be positive for the world for some odd reason or not, like they have somewhere else to live. Yeah, these space rockets are going up, but they're coming back down here with the people on them. They haven't stayed wherever they went. So people haven't yet taken on the full responsibility of stewardship that we as human beings are supposed to be here to do, and this shared responsibility that has to do with land. So when Brother Omar said what he said, I paused it, because my thing is the word blame and the word accountability are two different things. And accountability has to happen for activists. Activists are always about finding out who is to be held accountable for a thing. And when it comes to Mother Earth, she's proven, she spoke very loudly and told everybody to sit down and take a time out last year. And people have short memories that she was speaking loudly to say, I'm holding you all accountable for the destruction you've done to me. I need a break and I need some time to heal. And the minute everybody sat at home, the earth started healing. Fish started swimming in Venice and places people had never seen it. California, they could see for distance. They hadn't seen that in some people's lifetimes, so on and so forth. So for me, it is about having the faith to continue to press on and continue to have the voice, to continue to use your voice, continue to use your writing abilities and to express it, even when it seems like nobody's listening. And my biggest thing is always to say to people, Mother Earth is speaking very loudly, and you ought to listen to your mama. So that's the thing that for me, faith is always an aspect of activism. I haven't met an activist that didn't have something that drove them to continue, even when they couldn't really see that everybody else was making the moves that they wanted them to make. So we got to make a difference and listen to the mama.
Sometimes you hope when mothers speak, the children will listen.
That's right. That's right. Hopefully they listen sooner than later, for sure. There's always so much. I could listen to Queen Quet all day, but I think just to, follow so many things that she said, I, was thinking so many different things, but I think we have templates of how faith motivates our action. And one of the templates that I often go to, because I get so much inspiration, is from the civil rights movement of the 60s and the Southern Christian Coalition, Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And even today, the impetus really for me being a part of the Poor People's Campaign is really that, this, for so long, the impacts of our exploitive behaviors, wanting profit year over year to increase, damaging to the point of our land not being even giving us the same quality of nutrients that it once gave us. All of those things tied to this, these interlocking injustices that Dr. King, started talking about, the interlocking injustices of race and poverty, and then went on to even include militarism, and today including environmental degradation. But he was even talking about that in the 60s. Why are people being charged for water? Why is it they don't have clean drinking water? And it's that we have exploited not only people, but also the land. And again, it's really tied to the, not valuing people, not valuing the resources that we've been given in the way that we can sustain them for the future generation. We are very much, focused on immediate returns with little thoughts about the future, those who will come after us. And I think that our faith and our care and love for each other, for our neighbors, is what really motivates us to use our faith and put it into action.
You want me to? Or you going? Virginia, you going? Okay. For me, I'm Muslim, so in the Islamic faith, Prophet Muhammad has a saying that really motivates and inspires not only the work that I do, but I would like to say work that anyone that is conscious of God is motivated and inspired to do. He has said that we are to want for our neighbors, our brothers and sisters, what we want for ourselves. So if we want peace, we want that for the world. If we want justice, we want that for the world. We want a quality of life, right? Whatever that quality of life, access to resources to be able to improve your situation and your conditions of your community. We want that for everyone, regardless of who they are, regardless of their economic situation or their religious affiliation. We want that for everyone. Because we're all, like I think I heard recurring theme here, there's a common thread, right? And that common thread is that we are all humans and we're all connected to each other. And we're reflections of each other, right? When I see myself, I should see all of you in me. And I hope that when you see me, you see, you see yourself in me. And when we take that type of perspective, it's hard for us to mistreat someone. We see the environment part of us, right? Because we're part of creation. So when we see ourselves as part of creation, it is hard for us to mismanage creation, to destroy creation, right? It is only when we think that we are above and not a part of, that we don't see ourselves in that thing or in that person. So when we see ourselves part of creation, it's hard for us to do something that harms it. It's hard for us to do something to each other when we see ourselves in that person, right? Because we're doing it to us in many ways, right? So I think that is a perspective that I as a Muslim, that my religion, al-Islam, has shaped that perspective in me. So I'm in there, but.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same that we believe as well as Christians. The greatest is do unto your neighbor as you want done unto you. And I work with a lot of different faiths and people that sit at the table with us at our cafe, and we have this discussion on faith. And we found that that is the common ground that we all believe in. Is, again, same with the earth. If you want to do the same, we have a connection. We came from the earth, you know. So my faith is the same, I agree. And teaching from not just through the churches, because our churches are big here in Charleston. And that's where a lot of the faith and education comes from. I had an opportunity to go out and do outreach with all different types of denominational faiths and serve the community food, healthy food, and teach more about farming and eating from our land and growing our food, getting back to that. One, it does save money, and it also does better for our environment. And again, especially during the pandemic right now, a lot of us learn to farm and grow our own vegetables in our own gardens. So, yeah, faith is the same thing. We're connected and just treating each other the same and pretty much the same. And that's what we do out of Destiny, the cafe. We try to make sure that people, when they come through, that they're treating one another with kindness. And we work with our hands. We do this thing called a chop party. And before we start, we all take a moment of silence and we give respect to the ground, respect back to the earth, and then we begin to serve the food to our community. So, again.
Lovely to hear community speak of that sense of faith and action in their relationship. I'm struck by the absence when we use the word faith. It seems to me there's something that absent that we're yearning towards, and we act in order to bring that possibility to ourselves, to our community. And in that sense, when I wonder about faith and this mystery or the unknown or this absence that we act to bring to our community, I find myself in my body. I mean, what is it that is having the faith experience, and what is it that acts? And it's this body that I am, and this body that connects me to my brothers and sisters. And I'm struck then by the overlapping character of our bodies. We have this personal body, and it sometimes can be so demanding that we don't see the social body that we are too. Even in this room, we're gathered as a newly met. We exchange personal body, social body, and we have occasion to wonder now about our ecological body, and we're talking about it with a fair amount of force. And there have been some people who've been thinking about these things a lot longer than we have. This ecological body is something that really close, and then all of these traditions, they all are reaching out to the divine presence, this cosmological, and they almost all say it's right here, it's right now, it's present. It's this cosmological dimension is right now. It's really an interesting fourfold embodiment that faith and action calls us towards, and it's a mystery.
See if I can get the mic to work this time. Yay, technology. Okay, great. Thank you all for sharing. And I was wondering if you could speak more to kind of drill down on some examples within your communities in the ways that that you see perhaps eco-justice as an expression of faith, and if there are certain initiatives or practices that your community is working on to bring to light these overlaps and ways that they can support each other in making a more just world for not only human beings, but our non-human relatives.
Yeah, so I think at least for the community work that I have the privilege to participate in, I think I will work with Ecojustice, the Charleston area justice ministry. Definitely plugs exactly into what you are asking. That work is a collaborative effort of different religious organizations, religious groups coming together to work on not only social justice concerns, but also environmental justice. Environmental justice is one of the newest kind of call to action that Ecojustice has lifted up. And one of they not only work on that, but they work on housing and transportation, those things that are centered in our built environments, not only our built environments, but also how do we ensure that the less fortunate has access to, right? Like for example, when we are building green space, right? Do we do it in a way that is inclusive, or do we do it in a way that it's exclusive, right? And I can tell you that history has shown us that we do it in a way that is exclusive, right? We create these areas, pockets of areas that are isolating from amenities, isolating from, and trapping people in cycles of poverty, right? We wall off the things that we want to ignore. We wall them off and we put them aside and we don't address it. And those things that we value, right? It's all about what we value. Those things that we value, we highlight it. We give it openness. It's allowed to breathe, right? But those things that we don't want to deal with, we close it off and try to choke it, right? Choke the very life out of it. And a lot of times, what is being choked is our communities. The survival of low-wealth communities is being choked off. Well, I wouldn't say intentionally. I can't say that. But we may be doing it, unaware of the impacts, right?
Make things pretty.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that, historically it has been intentional, the erasure of, certain peoples, that's been intentionally done. And I think even thinking about historically those individuals who have contributed so much to the care for our earth. And so one, that I, just think should definitely be brought into the conversation is George Washington Carver, and thinking about the contribution that he gave to, the world really through his ability to, use what he knew from his experience. And he said it was his experience with God and nature that he was able to understand how this world operates, and to be able to see the devastation that our agricultural processes were having on the land, and to be able to see how you take really the historical knowledge that we had and had forgotten because it was erased from the area, and instead we implemented these strategies and agricultural practices that weren't sustainable. And he even, said 100 years ago that our environment is as susceptible to these synthetic things as we are to drugs. He knew that 100 years ago, and yet many times that history is erased. And I think, being able as people of faith to acknowledge, as you mentioned earlier, our part in that erasure, but also to understand different ways that we can begin to contribute really to the remembering of our complete full history, as well as implementing these practical things. Like with South Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, we, one of the programs that has been ongoing for the past 4 years is the Congregational Energy Efficiency Challenge. And you spoke a little bit about some of the congregations and houses of worship across the country who are doing energy efficiency projects. And we specifically target houses of worship that serve marginalized communities, because we know that they could do so much if they had the additional income to be able to use for serving their community, really, responding to the mission that they have, rather than using it on, electrical bills because their building is inefficient. So I think that's just one example of how, the faith community responds to caring for people, caring for our environment, is through some of those practical things, but also by really addressing our history and the role that we've played, but also how we can then address it in a just way, in a loving way.
One of the ways that I know that we've been working locally, as well as I'm part of another organization called One World Everybody Eats, and we are all pay what you can cafes. And but one of the things we do is we do organic as much as possible. We work with the farms and we educate through our cafes. John Bon Jovi, rock and roll singer, he's up in New Jersey. He has his third Pay What You Can cafe. And most of the cafes are 100% vegan. I'm in the South, so we're not 100% vegan. But we are educating, and we are letting people taste and let people try and see that they can incorporate more vegan foods or plant-based foods into their diet. And we're in the South, all this farm, we're eating a lot of plant-based. Most of our plates is probably 80% plant-based anyway. So that's one of the ways that we use here locally and globally with One World Everybody Eats. Also, I've working with a couple of the colleges here, Clemson, and here right on campus at College of Charleston, with the technology students are actually implementing and including in their texts and their apps to make sure that they work on getting things that are helping with people to shop more feasibly with the apps they're creating as well. And then also we have more restaurants in town. I'm part of a few restaurant groups, and especially, it costs more, but especially since the pandemic, everybody's been on carry-out containers. There's not as much walk-in traffic, but they're being more conscious now on using environmental friendly products. So implementing things like that. On the faith-based side, I work with a lot of outreach for churches, and it came to our attention that we were using foam containers because that was the least expensive thing, and that's all we knew. So now we're implementing as well, doing more environmental friendly products that we give to the homeless when we packaged up their meal and we go out and give out for outreach. So that's what we do on the hospitality and food and beverage side. And again, just making sure that the young people here are creating more tech-savvy things that are helping us keep the data and keeping the research, and we're able to communicate through an app they're using nationally. We're hoping to bring it in Charleston, and this app lets restaurants be able to, instead of wasting their food, they put it in the app, and then our volunteers are able to sign up to get it to the outreaches and the soup kitchens, and we can create another whole meal, and that's reducing the waste.
So what I want to address it while I answer your initial question is erasure and revisionism. The Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition was the first organization in world history to have the words Gullah and Geechee in the name put together. At that, I'm a computer scientist, so I can tell you definitively when the internet came into being for the public, because it was something for the US government military before it became for the public. When it came into being for the public, if you typed in Gullah Geechee together, you'd find nothing. If you typed in the word Gullah, you would have less than a page of things to look through. And if you typed in the word Geechee, you might have a page. You would not have numbers at the bottom with arrows telling you to click to another page. So in the discussion of the intentionality of some to erase, the unfortunate reality is something that was in my mind this morning, how people have attempted to erase the fact that Gullah Geechee people exist, or they've tried to revise the storyline and the narrative of our existence. And the disgrace of it for me is that I'm still alive, and people have even tried to erase me and tried to now replace that with some other narrative that only puts us in a plantation era. And it ties to the revisioning of the entire coast, which has led to the destruction of the coast, is people revisioning this coast in some happy plantation atmosphere where the people who look like me were just singing and stirring pots of food. And been never that tall and thing like that. I ain't going to never be like that. But this is what I call a Hollywoodization of people's communities and cultures. And so when they don't want to be accountable for telling the truth, that there is a trajectory of freedom that's continued to be fought for from the time of enslavement to this moment we are in, where we are talking about everything from what people call JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, all the way to environmental justice and various things. The terminology may be different in different arenas, but for most people who are of African descent in North America, much less throughout the African diaspora, there's always been this continued fight for justice, much less equity and equality, which are different, okay? And then to have their voices heard from their own perspective in totality. And so when you say, what do I see in the work that I'm doing, what kind of brings me to this work that we're here to talk about today, my initial thought was about my engagement now through the Gullah Geechee Sea Island Coalition with South Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, because South Carolina Interfaith Power and Light literally became a breath of fresh air in my own home state for people who wanted to sit and hear and share each other's stories, the good, the bad, the indifferent, but then say, in the midst of all of it, what do we do together? In this circle, how do we bring together that power of faith that will allow us to create a more just society in general, not just for South Carolina, but if we start at home, my mama raised me to say charity begins at home and then goes abroad. So if we start at home, how can we take it back abroad? Which goes back to what I mentioned earlier. It gives me an opportunity now not to just sit in international rooms and listen to folks talk about what they're doing elsewhere, but to say, this is what I am doing in South Carolina throughout the state. And our project that really speaks volumes to me, that South Carolina Interfaith Power and Light said they want to make a permanent annual project, is the Tree Project. This came from another sister being in a discussion with us around a movie. And this movie speaking to all the elements and saying, what about these elements? What is happening to these elements as a result of Anthropocene things, human things? And then what happens as humans? What do we do to make it better? And she mentioned how in her home country, they don't have these trees. And now there's this project to plant all these trees. And while she was sharing a very painful story and people were crying and people were trying to feel this, I went and Googled trees in there and what can we do? Because I said we need to do something more than just say, oh, that's so sad, and put up emojis in the chat box. And so from that, here came this project. So this year, well, was it this year, really kind of ending last year, kind of coming into this year? We started it, we launched it in the midst of a pandemic, but we still caused people to want to grow that tree for that next generation of people. By the time those trees are fully grown, none of us might be here to sit beneath them and get the shade, but somebody else will. And what story will they tell there? Will they tell the truth, or will they have erased out who did it? Would they have revised the words and take out the pain part and just celebrate the prettiness of the tree? We have to tell it all if we're going to be truthful and we're going to engage, and people of faith know that you have those days. I take sound like Frankie Beverly, but y'all in Charleston, y'all love him anyway. Joy and pain. All right, sunshine and rain, you're going to have that. So we have to do it in totality, and we don't have a tree growing without the sun and the rain. And so this moment that we are in right now, this circle we are in right now, feels like those seeds of new trees being planted. And that's the thing that I would love the world to remember in its totality, and that they do not erase any part of it, and especially not who we be as Gullah Geechee, and who's still fighting for our self-determination and shouting underneath that same oak tree and things like that we ancestors been planting. So that's the thing for me, is hearing your whole discussion. I couldn't let that part go, because it can be a very painful thing to have people try to erase you and you're alive. But I experience it weekly. It's weekly I experience it. But we have to tell truth. And I believe that people of faith are ever walking toward the truth. And may the truth be told in the future, that even this discussion today, we did it because we wanted to make a difference for those coming behind us.
Wow.
Amen. The echo of Muhammad, I believe, in one of the hadith, Queen Mother Muhammad was approached, and someone said to Muhammad, it's the end times. What shall I do? It's the end of everything. And Muhammad said, plant a tree.
Yes.
Plant a tree.
Yeah.
Thanks
Yes.
for your remarks.
Yes.
Yeah, the wisdom and insight of our speakers is really uplifting and heart-filling for a visitor like Mary Evelyn and myself. We come into the local setting and we have occasion to learn and to carry back to our students what we're hearing and what we're learning here. And it's an overwhelming experience to hear Wangari Maathai, to hear your sisters talking from out of her experiences in Kenya. And the Green Belt movement, it just started locally. It's just women started planting trees, that sense of people standing up and bringing their faith to action. And so I was a visitor out in British Columbia areas too, and want to mention Wet'suwet'en people, and they're standing up. The traditional people in the Wet'suwet'en have this whole problem of a tribal government that's imposed upon them by the nation state of Canada. And so that tribal government and election government, it has all of the motivations of goodness that it's trying to accomplish, but it's in favor of that pipeline. But traditional people say, no way, they don't want that pipeline. So the Wet'suwet'en, even among themselves, they have to deal with this controversy internally. But the traditional people, their faith and their action is leading them to stand up repeatedly, and they're being pushed out, they're being threatened, the elders are having their children's lives threatened. So faith and action is not always I'm talking to people who know, it's not always easy.
That's right.
These are all such amazing stories, right? And I think this is something that I can sort of pick out of your last remarks, or that this need to share stories and to listen, right? And to not just try to fill space as sometimes we are wont to do, but to really learn to listen to those voices that have been forcibly erased across our community. And so I think maybe in my last question, before we turn it to the audience, to just focus on something that all of you brought up in this last remark, was that sort of the core idea of interfaith work, right? And that it can't just be one voice and one story, but many shared stories. And so I wonder if you could speak to the way that you see interfaith work specifically as an opportunity for eco-justice.
I mean, again, I point to, and I think all of us have this in our spiritual guidance that is provided to us from God. Al-Islam teaches us that, and it's in the Quran, where it states that God made us different and made different tribes, right? So that we get to learn each other, right? Wouldn't it be a boring world if we all were the same, we all thought alike? It'd be very boring. But what makes us, as human beings, very uniquely positioned is that we are different and that we experience the world different, and we shape the world based on our lived experiences. And I think that those are opportunities for dialogue, right? Interfaith opportunities where there is more common in our engagement with each other, in our religious understanding of what God has revealed to us. There's more commonality in that than differences. We differ on theological things in religion, but there's more commonality in our religions than they are differences. So what we need to work on are those things that we agree about. We agree on more than we do disagree. So let's find those areas where we can work together, right? And agree on and work on those things. And then God also warns us that there are things that we don't quite understand. But as religious people, we tend to bicker over those things that are not understandable, right? God didn't make it clear to us to understand it at that moment in that period of time. But we tend to fight that. Those are the things that we split hair on. You know, we just find a reason to disagree on. But I think interfaith allows us to be able to find those commonalities and to be able to work across our differences and get to know each other, get to understand different religions, in faith groups, and being able to work on building a world, right, where everyone's potential can be realized. And I think that's what God wants us to work on, right? Because God has told us that He has made every human being in the same mold. We all have that excellent pattern, right? That God made humanity. And if we recognize that pattern, right, that human pattern that wants a good life established, then that's our commonality. I don't know anyone that doesn't want a good quality of life, or want a clean environment, or clean water, clean air, clean land. I don't know any human being that wants to live in an area that is harmful to them, or a situation that is harmful to them. So that's our commonality, and I think that's interfaith work, right? And we need to do more of it. I think we don't do enough of it. We tend not to talk to each other. We talk past each other a lot, right? We don't listen. You know, my father used to say, when we were not paying attention as children, right? He'd say, "Open up your ears," right? Open up your ears and listen. So we need to do a lot more listening to each other, and not listening for the purpose of disagreeing, because we do that a lot too. We listen to someone just to disagree with them, right? But listen to understand, and to understand their situation and in their conditions. And we cannot, and I think that's a mistake that we made. We cannot project on other people our faith understanding. We just cannot. Because people experience the world different. And our religion is just one lens of how we view the world. Just one. And we have many lenses.
And so for me, interfaith is essential because unfortunately, religions have been hijacked and have been utilized in really destructive ways.
Yep.
And of course, we have, examples of that in this country. And so for me, that is why it's critical that we work in an interfaith way to, have dialogue and to listen to one another. Because unfortunately, it's been used in ways that have been very, very divisive for a long time.
Same kind of here. Interfaith is important. We could do more with the Army. Simple as that. If we all come together, we're more effective.
Yep.
I'm struck by, when I hear Regina speak, idea comes to my mind, it's like a neon light just goes off. I don't think we'll ever be in a post-food world. So there's a basis for dialogue, and these kind of things. We're never going to be in a post-food world. I'm struck, and a career in this whole business of interreligious dialogue, I'm struck by how religions, they're different. I really agree with that, and I think that your point you're making about listening, and that it's hard, it's really tough, because I sense what religions have to say to one another too is they complete something in their brothers and sisters. I'm trying to say this. I'm trying to repeat a thought that my teacher Thomas Sperry gave to us. He said, religions complete one another. I've been thinking about this for 30, 40 years. What did he mean by that? And it strikes me there's something about these traditions. Islam, can you just box it up? Judaism, it's nice and neat and packaged. They're so messy, aren't they? They're just all over the place, these things we call religions. And the word process is helpful in some ways. It's never done, it's going on. So if these religions, they can be identified, we can talk about them, and we say they can talk to one another, it can be productive in a community to diminish some of this, the racial hatred that we have, and the possibility of racial love, the sense of love between one another. But these traditions carry wisdom, insights. There's something about Judaism that's not found in any other religion. There's something about Hinduism that's not found in any tradition. And what is it then that a Hindu brings to a Jain in India that completes what it is that the Jain tradition is thinking about? That's a question for me. I sense it's the joy of our times in a way, is that we have the opportunity now to talk from our lives and our experience, and we're going to be talking with people who really want to hear, because it completes them. It's something I'm hearing something about myself from you. Yeah.
So for me, religion and spirituality are different things, but faith can be found in either of those or both of those. And the expression of interfaith in my life has been very interesting for me. And one of the examples that I always give to people is when they come and try to compartmentalize Gullah Geechees and what our religious practices are. And I said, you'll never really be able to do that if there's a traditional Gullah Geechee present. So you can't write something and just, blanket everybody the same. And, a lot of times reporters or philosophers, sociologists, anthropologists, give you that RCA dog kind of look, like lean. And so I'll give you a prime example. I said I could walk up to somebody and say, Assalamu alaikum, walaikum salam, Hunakayan in church this evening, anything like that. What time it start? Boy, it could be to the priest or something like that at 7 o'clock. Okay, I could do that, all right, peace. Or shalom. And somebody else is confused. In the Western society, that's totally confusing. They need to extrapolate what is this, because they've just used a multiplicity of different religious terminologies, but to us it wasn't. It's all just part of our culture. It's all one and the same. It's others that compartmentalize and put the signs outside of certain doors and say, well, this is this, or gave you this book versus that book. And then you did these particular rituals that make up that particular branch or denomination of this thing, that oftentimes is really religion instead of really spirituality. And in any of them, you have to get your own faith. So my opportunities to be in true interfaith groups have come without me seeking them out or anything. People have walked up to me all different places in the world and will speak to me in whatever, Alafia, I'm like, Alafiani, you know, and okay, so sister, what about this and this and this? And I'm looking like, why they pick me? You know, hetepu, how honor to do. Oh, all right, well, how about this, sister? And I'm sitting there going, wow, everybody's religion comes and talks to me. Where there's other people who they're in one little compartment and they only engage with those in their compartment. So one of the blessed things that happened in my life was when the Interfaith Pilgrimage of the Middle Passage group walked from Boston, Massachusetts, down the East Coast. I met them in Charleston at a church. And then they walked down to my home island, St. Helena Island. We hosted them here. And from here, that day, I had my own Pentecost day, and that's a whole story for another time. And that group, some of that group, we then took them down to Georgia. I thought after they would get out, and they said they were going to walk till they got to Florida, then they would get on some boats and they were going to go to the Caribbean. They were going backwards through the pathway of the triangular slave trade, as it's often referred to, going backward through the Middle Passage. Black people, white people, Asian people, Latina people. There were a variety of people represented of all different ethnicities, different genders, and definitely different spiritual practices, different faiths. I never thought I would necessarily see them again, sit with them again. And way later, about a decade later, I was asked, not only to be in a documentary, that was some years later and a decade later, but I was heading to England because they were commemorating the abolition of the British slave trade. And I was determined I was going to be in England for this commemoration. I was going to save what I had to. I was going to get there one way or another. And they contacted me and said they were going to be there as well. And we all marched through the streets of England together to say how this crime against humanity was wrong, how the Church of England needed to not only apologize, but pay some sort of restitution, reparations, how those involved needed to repent from what had been done, and how we as a world, we as people of faith, had to change the world for the better so that no one else would be enslaved again. No one else would be put into bondage again. So that group is iconic for me in this question. When you ask about this interfaith, I immediately could see that rainbow of people that marched through those streets together, and we laid a wreath in the water. And you had priests, you had imams, you had rabbis, you had folks that don't have a title in their particular spiritual practice, but are leaders therein. You had me, you had all of us there. There were Gullah Geechees that were there that came together to know that if we all prayed together, if we all walked together, if we all put our spirits together and our faith together, we could make a difference, and that there was power in doing that. And I still believe there's power in doing that. And so that's why I prefer interfaith groups, even when I don't search them out and God has it, that they find me. I enjoy being there as much as I enjoy being in the praise house of the church, singing spirituals and things like that, and the shout, like this, and all of that. That broadens the circle, the same way my ancestors brought together all their spiritual practices and then created the one I've grown up in. And so being interfaith is just part of my inner being. and it really gives more understanding of others in the world and how we can stand together.
Thank you all. Really, I have such gratitude for these stories and sharing the such rich narratives about interfaith work and eco-justice. And we are running out of time, but I thought that for our last question, maybe one formal question from the audience, and then those who need to get to the rest of their day are welcome to depart, and we'll kind of maybe stick around a little bit and have it more informal conversations after that, if everyone's amenable to such things. But is there a question from the audience that is dying to ask?
Don't die, live, live, don't die, live.
Is there, oh,
I was just going to say, I was going to ask, we've heard a good bit about interreligious organizations, and Kajum was brought up, or interfaith organization, and Interfaith Power and Light, and I think there are a number, and obviously the work that we're doing here today, I think is so important. I wonder if you can imagine a way in which these organizations can work together towards some sort of common goal, if you will, or if there are ways that you see your organizations that you all represent or communities you all represent. What are we missing out on? What is the link? And are we missing out? Are these pockets of work good enough in the way that they emerge? Are there ways that we can do things differently? I would love to.
On the missing out part, I would say this. The most segregated time in America is Sunday morning, has been stated over and over in the past. So people staying within their one religious body would be what we're missing out on. It would be getting us out and more engaged together. I think not a lot more people watch a lot of different types of religious materials, spiritual engagements online, especially due to the pandemic that has been going on. I think that has engaged more minds and more spirits together. And so if we can kind of build on what has happened, I think that would be a great thing.
Yeah, ditto that. I was just about to say the same thing, that what Queen Quet has covered. So, yeah.
I agree. Bringing us together, something would be more common to get us together. I would say food at the table. Let's eat, yeah. So, yeah, that's, the best way, I think, that everybody can come together and start working our efforts together to be a mighty force. That's a great dream that could become reality. And I think, like you said, this is a start.
And I'd say from, my experience is a lot of times we end up in rooms where everybody in that room already thinks the same thing that we think. And so we don't grow because we are not allowing ourselves to grow. So when we come together and intentionally, then we actually are able to, begin to develop in new ways that we can't when we don't come together. So I think that all of the organizations who are concerned about each other, about people, about the conditions of our society should come together because no one has all of the answers. And we all know that. You live long enough, you learn that every day there's something new to learn. But boy, we get a whole lot further and know a whole lot more when we're coming together.
I'm struck by the water issue that Regina mentioned earlier, people in need of water, and for a community to begin to recognize what happens at a particular moment, like a flood, or when there's a moment of need, for the interreligious community to have thought and to gather a number of groups together to address that need at a particular moment, to have prepare ahead of time to bring water to those in need. Be interesting. Yeah. Faith-based responding to need.
Interfaith, yeah.
This isn't later. And Queen, I wish I could give you a hug. I wish we could give each of these ladies, and yes, really, it's so special. So thank you, really, to all of you.
Thank you all for coming out and flying.
I had your name before.
Yeah, and I
met you.
think also to just echo Mary Evelyn, I just on behalf of the Charleston Interfaith Council and the College of Charleston, and just like as a human, thank you so much for your really thoughtful comments and your time, and just wishing you all luck and peace and joy in your efforts to fight for a more just world in all of your different ways. So thank you.
We appreciate you. Can I share one thing for everybody?
Please.
My memories came up on Facebook, and on this day, a few years ago, I was speaking there at the College of Charleston. I was presenting on this exact same date. About 3 years ago, I said. So I just wanted to share that with everyone because I believe in divine order. So I'm sure it was divinely ordered for me to be part of this today. And I just want to say thank you for having me as part of this year. God bless all of you and stay safe and stay healthy.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you all. Feel free to continue to chat with one another, but we'll sort of formally say that the event is over. Thank you.
Thank you for this was great. You got me thinking. Absolutely. I'll see you.
Well, I was going to ask you.
Oh, good.
But I am teaching in the fall.
It's good to see you. I have a question